A man told me I couldn't possibly understand politics. I'm literally the mayor. After 3 terms as mayor, I'd gotten pretty good at blending into charity events without my security detail. And when a man in an expensive suit asked what I did, I just said I worked in local government. Robert's eyes lit up like I'd just admitted I couldn't read, and immediately started explaining how lucky I was to have found any job in the public sector, since they usually only hired women to fill quotas. He guessed I was probably answering phones or organizing someone's calendar, and when I mentioned working closely with the mayor's office, he laughed and said, "Oh, honey, making coffee and taking notes isn't really working with the mayor, but I'm sure you're very good at organizing his schedule." I took a sip of wine instead of correcting him because this was about raising money for sick kids, not my ego. He started explaining how city government worked while massaging my shoulder, telling me that women didn't understand that real decisions got made in back rooms between businessmen who ran things. When I tried to politely give him my 2 cents, he put his finger to my lips and said, "Sweetheart, I've been studying politics since before you were born, so listen more and talk less because this is probably all going over your pretty little head." The hospital's director was watching nervously, and I knew any drama would overshadow the fundraising. His friend Chris joined us, and Robert introduced me as this sweet girl who thinks she understands politics because she files papers at City Hall. Chris asked if I brought them coffee during meetings, and when I said no, he guessed I must water the plants. They both started explaining how women's brains weren't wired for leadership, and I kept my face neutral because Chris was a major donor. Robert grabbed my phone when it buzzed with a text from my deputy about tomorrow's press conference, reading it out loud in a mocking voice and saying I was adorable for playing pretend government with my work friends. He scrolled through my messages while Chris looked over his shoulder, making comments about how I probably had a crush on my boss because women in politics were just looking for powerful men to marry. When they saw a message about city ordinances, Robert patted my head and said those big words were too complicated for me to understand. Then Robert pulled up an article about how cities run by women always fail because females make emotional decisions instead of logical ones. Chris nodded along, saying the women getting elected was why America was falling apart. They nodded, saying women should stick to teaching and nursing where maternal instincts were useful, instead of pretending they understood budgets and laws. And I just smiled because we were 3 donors away from our goal, and that's when I could finally cause drama. Robert grabbed my wrist, pulling me closer, saying that women voters were ruining the country by voting for whoever promised free stuff or had charming smiles instead of understanding actual issues. Then he described his ideal candidate who would put women back in their proper roles and stop wasting taxpayer money on daycare and maternity leave that encouraged women to abandon families. And I focused on the auction paddle in his other hand with a $50,000 bid. Chris asked if I'd ever met the mayor, and Robert answered for me, saying someone at my level would never get FaceTime with important people unless serving drinks or taking dictation. He explained the mayor was probably some beta male who hired women to look progressive, but secretly knew they were incompetent, which explained the city's problems. They listed everything wrong with our city that I'd actually fixed during my terms, giving me credit for nothing while explaining how a real man would handle